The fire didn't start in the loading dock. It started the day no one listened to Troy Maxwell. Chaos crackled through the mall like dry leaves in a windstorm. Smoke poured from the service corridor, alarms screeched above the roar of panicked shoppers, and red exit signs flickered under the weight of flashing strobe lights. Somewhere between the perfume counter and the escalator, a child screamed for his mother. Black Friday had officially become a war zone. But Troy Maxwell didn't run. He stood at the edge of it all, the dull navy of his security uniform catching embers of red from the fire alarms. His shoulders, broad and steady, didn't flinch. His eyes didn't search for the exits. He knew where they were. He'd mapped every inch of this mall. 11 years of night shifts had taught him how chaos hides in plain sight. The difference was, this time, he had warned them. Weeks ago, he'd sent a memo. 3 of them, actually. One about the faulty cameras in the east loading dock. One about the missing electronics inventory from storage. And one, the one that would be buried deepest, about a senior staff member caught on an unregistered feed, walking out with a dolly full of sealed boxes. Her name was Harper Jennings, and she was the golden girl of corporate sales. But this part of the story, the part where flames licked the ceiling tiles and emergency sprinklers refused to work, this wasn't the beginning. This was the consequence. The beginning? It was quieter. A hallway, an overlooked voice, a laugh behind closed doors when they called him paranoid. "It's not your job to investigate," Harper had told him. "It's to watch." Well, he had watched. He'd watched carts leave inventory at 2 a.m. when the dock was supposed to be locked. He'd watched a manager log into the camera system and delete 30 minutes of footage, right after his report was submitted. He'd watched his weekly shifts mysteriously reduce after he filed the 3rd memo. Troy had been a security guard long enough to know what this was. Not a misunderstanding. A cover-up. But here's the part no one ever expects. He wasn't just watching the mall. He was watching them. That morning, before the fire, he'd stood in front of his locker, quiet, methodical, buttoning his shirt, sliding his name tag into place. There was something ritualistic about it, like armor before battle. He wasn't even supposed to be on duty that day. Harper had made sure of that. But Troy came in anyway. He came in because something in his gut, something old, maybe ancestral, told him this Black Friday wouldn't end in discounts and doorbusters. It would end in flames and secrets. Across the mall, CEO Logan Whitmore sat in a glass office 3 floors above, sipping espresso, watching numbers spike on the online dashboard. He barely knew Troy Maxwell's name, but that was about to change, because in exactly 27 minutes, Logan would be staring at a security feed with ash on his collar and disbelief in his eyes. And Troy? Troy would be the only one still standing. Some people scream to be heard. Others stay silent, because they know the fire's coming. The question is, will you be watching when the smoke clears? Before the flames, there were whispers, and every whisper had a badge on it. For most people, Black Friday was a battlefield of discounts and desperation. For Troy Maxwell, it was another shift walking the edge between truth and invisibility. He arrived every day wearing navy blue, not just on his uniform, but in his eyes. The kind of blue that saw everything but was asked to say nothing. At 48, Troy had worked as head of overnight security at the Rosedale Grand Mall, longer than most managers had even lasted a fiscal year. He knew the layout of that building better than the architects. He knew where the dead zones in the CCTV were. And more importantly, he knew who pretended not to see. They called him too serious, too suspicious, always looking for something. And they weren't wrong, because something was missing. It started small, like most thefts do. 1 box of Bluetooth speakers, a few smartwatches. Then larger items disappeared from inventory lists without matching sales. And always, Without fail, they vanished between 2:04 and 4:00 a.m. That was Troy's shift. He didn't jump to conclusions. He documented, checked logs, noted serial numbers, cross-checked loading dock deliveries. His notes grew into full reports. 3 memos, each sent directly to his supervisor. Each one lost in the system. And then came Ms. Harper Jennings. Harper walked like a promotion. Blonde bob, crisp heels, lanyard swinging like a weapon of status. She wasn't just management. She was mall royalty. The regional director of sales, handpicked by the board, trusted by the Whitmore family themselves. The moment she saw Troy, she didn't just look at him. She evaluated him. "Maxwell, you're always staring at shadows," she'd said once, her voice sugar-laced with steel. "Maybe that's why you don't get invited into the light." That was the first week she arrived. By the second, Troy's hours had been cut. By the third, she'd restructured the overnight schedule to include random security rotations, eliminating consistency, making it harder for anyone to track patterns. She wanted control of the watchtower, and she got it. But what Harper didn't know was this: Troy wasn't alone. His younger sister, Rashida, worked in logistics 2 floors down. Soft-spoken but sharp-eyed, she had once been denied a manager promotion despite outperforming her peers for 2 years straight. They said she lacked leadership presence. What she had, instead, was access to inventory logs, RFID data, and a backdoor admin panel for the warehouse security cams. And late one night she saw it. Harper, in the loading dock, no clipboard, no scanner, just a key, a dolly, and a sealed box that didn't scan out. She didn't speak, not right away, because Rashida knew speaking out got you fired, but saving everything, that got you leverage. She told Troy 3 days before Black Friday. He nodded once. "Quiet. Just like always, keep the files safe," he said. Meanwhile, the mall hummed with holiday madness. LED snowflakes, peppermint-scented air, carolers paid by the hour. The public face was cheerful. Inside? Pressure was boiling. Sales goals, budget cuts, staff conflicts. Rumors swirled that CEO Logan Whitmore would be making a surprise visit. Most thought it was to boost morale. Troy suspected otherwise, because Logan had been CEO for less than 6 months, taking over after his father's quiet retirement. And he was known not for speeches, but for silence. And no man silent that long comes without questions. Troy stood that Tuesday afternoon by the east exit, clipboard in hand, pretending to double-check fire escape compliance. But what he was really doing was watching the watchers. He saw Harper pacing with her assistant, whispering with a clipboard turned away from cameras. He caught her glancing at the freight elevator's manual override key. He logged every movement, every timing, but he didn't submit a report. Not this time, because this time, he planned to let the fire speak for him. Some people guard the exits, others guard the truth, but only one will decide how the story ends. The moment he saw her with the box, he didn't flinch. He took out his pen. It was Wednesday night, 2 days before Black Friday, and the mall had emptied into silence. That kind of silence only the night staff knew. The kind that echoed too loudly when someone moved where they shouldn't. Troy Maxwell stood by the freight elevator, clipboard in hand, pen ready, eyes fixed on the far corner of the corridor. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't sneaking. He was watching. And then she came, Harper Jennings, wrapped in a sleek trench coat, heels clicking softly against the tile. No assistant, no clipboard, no scanner gun. Just her, a key, and a silver dolly with one large box sealed tight in shrink wrap. Troy didn't move. He waited until she turned the corner and slid the freight door open. She looked over her shoulder. No cameras in that angle. She thought. She didn't see the mirror tile Troy had angled earlier that week. He watched her push the dolly in and disappear. He wrote the time. 11:12 p.m. The box unscanned. Harper. Alone. Violation of security protocol. 14. He walked back to the security station like a man carrying dynamite in his chest. By Thursday morning, he had finished compiling a full memo, cross-referenced against inventory logs, freight access keys, and personnel ID swipes. He titled it, Unauthorized Access to Dock Area, Suspected Internal Theft. He attached it to an encrypted message, sent it to Regional Management, Mall Director, Security Oversight Officer, CEO's Office, a generic inbox, but he sent it anyway. And then, by noon, the retaliation came. His login failed. System error. Then his schedule disappeared from the upcoming roster. No response to the memo, no confirmation, no denial. Then a message from HR. Mr. Maxwell, due to unforeseen shift realignment, you are not currently scheduled for the remainder of the weekend. Please contact us Monday for updated placement. He knew what that meant. They had buried the report and buried him along with it. But Harper wasn't done. That afternoon, she filed an internal complaint against Troy, claiming he had lingered near the women's locker area and made uncomfortable inquiries into her movements. It was clear. She wasn't just hiding something. She was preemptively burning the whistleblower. Troy sat in the back of the empty staff lounge, holding his badge in his hand, his fingers slow on the metal. He didn't call HR. He didn't argue. Instead, he texted Rashida one line. Upload the mirror feed to your cloud. Keep it off-site. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was all he needed. And then came Black Friday. Troy wasn't on the schedule, but he came in anyway. Dark jacket, no badge, just a pen and the folder in his hand. He positioned himself at the emergency exit near the receiving bay, not to stop shoppers, not to monitor customers, but to watch the system collapse from the inside. 10:08 a.m. Over 2,000 people filled the mall. At 10:13, the West fire alarm triggered. False? No. Real fire. Smoke curled from the lower dock access hall. Troy didn't panic. He opened his folder. Inside, printed emails with ignored warnings, time-stamped notes, screenshots from Rashida, and one photo of Harper entering the elevator with the box. People ran, managers screamed, sprinklers failed to activate, and Troy stood, calm, quiet, with the weight of the truth in his arms. He had given them every chance to act, every chance to listen. But now, the fire was speaking for him. Elsewhere, in the glass office, Logan Whitmore stared at the camera feed in disbelief. His assistant handed him the folder Troy left with reception. Logan flipped through each page, jaw tightening. He turned to his team and said simply, "Get me the full security dump. I want everyone who had access in the past 72 hours. The truth had finally crossed the threshold. But justice, that was just beginning. Some warnings come with a signature, others come with flames. But the ones we ignore? They come back with proof. They called him paranoid. Now they were calling 911. It took less than 8 minutes for the chaos to consume the entire West Wing. Shoppers had stormed out through the broken glass of the side exit. Parents screamed names into the smoke. A pregnant woman collapsed outside the pharmacy, while a security intern, not even trained for emergencies, tried to revive her with trembling hands. Inside the security hub, phones rang like gunfire. One by one, they realized the smoke detectors hadn't triggered in 2 zones. The sprinkler valves? Disconnected. The fire? It started exactly where Troy had filed his 3rd memo. And then came the truth that spread faster than smoke. There were warnings. A report was filed. Someone knew this could happen. And that someone was the man they tried to silence. Troy Maxwell didn't watch the panic. He watched the leadership. He stood just behind the escalators, folder clutched like a verdict. His eyes tracked every movement of Harper Jennings, heels now replaced by emergency flats, hair in disarray, lips pressed tight into the kind of silence only guilt wears. She avoided eye contact, spoke in clipped commands, and when she spotted Troy, standing with no badge, just a folder in hand, she froze. Not for long. Just enough to know her fire had failed. By noon, the mall was evacuated. News vans swarmed the exits. Footage leaked, not of the fire, but of the memo Troy had written. Someone from IT forwarded it to a friend in media. 32 minutes later, it hit Twitter. Black security guard warned of fire risks. Mall ignored him. Now it's burning. Justice for Troy. Black Friday truth. Public pressure exploded. Corporate tried damage control. But then came the email. From the desk of CEO Logan Whitmore, "We are aware of reports indicating that a member of our security staff filed multiple warnings regarding safety hazards in our mall facilities. An internal investigation is underway, and we are cooperating fully with the fire marshal and legal authorities." Short, formal, but beneath it, a shift. A silence that finally had a witness. Troy sat alone in the now deserted food court. Trays overturned, fries cold, glitter from holiday signage scattered across the tiles like fallen confetti. He didn't need to smile, didn't need a thank you, but he did remember something. Flashback, nested loop. 5 years ago, Troy had filed a complaint against a manager who made racist jokes in the break room. No one backed him. He was almost fired for creating a hostile work environment. Since then, he learned, speak only when the truth is heavier than the silence. And today, it was. Back at the temporary command center, Logan stared at a blown-up printout of the memo. He turned to his VP of operations. "Why wasn't this escalated?" No one answered. Then he asked, "Where is Mr. Maxwell right now?" At 3:12 p.m., Troy was called into a private office. Not HR, not security. Logan's office. The man behind the glass desk didn't offer coffee. He offered eye contact, the kind that doesn't flinch. Logan held the memo, held the folder, held the weight of a system that failed under his name. And then he said, "I should have known your silence wasn't absence. It was warning." Troy said nothing. He didn't need to. They ignored him when he spoke. But now? The building was listening. The world was watching. And silence had finally run out of places to hide. Long before the mall had security cameras and laminated evacuation maps, Troy Maxwell had learned to memorize exits, not from floor plans, but from instinct. Years ago, back when he worked night security at a high school on the east side, he stopped a fight before it began. One white boy had been circling a black freshman, calling him charcoal, threatening to clean him off the campus. Troy stepped in, quiet but firm. No violence, no shouting, just presence. The boy backed down. But later the parents complained about Troy, said he had intimidated their child. That freshman, his name was Logan Whitmore. He never forgot. Troy had never spoken to him since. But Logan had remembered the man who didn't raise his voice, just raised the line no one else dared cross. And now, all these years later, the two men were sitting across from each other again. But this time, Logan had the badge, and Troy had the evidence. While Logan weighed next steps, another kind of truth moved quietly through the building. Rashida had downloaded every shred of off-the-books surveillance footage from her backup system. She never trusted the official servers. They could be wiped. She kept everything local, and then uploaded it anonymously. Footage appeared online, time-stamped, labeled. Harper Jennings, 11:12 p.m., freight elevator, unscanned box. The internet didn't hesitate. Comment sections burned with outrage. How do you fire the guy who tried to save you? She staged a smear report against him. This man saved lives and got benched. That's the story. It wasn't just a scandal now. It was a reckoning. By the next morning, Harper Jennings walked into the executive suite like a woman marching to her own funeral. Her team had tried to shield her, claiming she'd been framed, that the footage was out of context. But the context had a name, Troy Maxwell, and the building had started whispering his name like a prayer that came too late. Troy didn't revel in her fall. He stayed quiet. He kept walking his usual third-floor route like nothing changed, because for him, nothing had. He didn't expose her for revenge. He did it because he knew what it meant to lose everything because no one believed you. He'd seen his father denied a promotion at the post office despite 22 years of clean service, watched the pain in a man's eyes as younger, less competent hires took his seat because they fit the image. That was why he wrote reports in full paragraphs. That was why he never lost his badge. That was why he kept files others deleted. Somewhere between the food court and the fire exit, Rashida caught up to him. She didn't say, "I told you so." She handed him a printout, a screenshot of the internal server. The subject line: Reinstatement Recommendation, Maxwell T. Signed, L. Whitmore. But Troy didn't look surprised. He looked tired, as if justice, when delayed long enough, stopped feeling like a win, not with cheers, but with quiet nods from janitors, a smile from the cafe cashier who used to be afraid to wave. And then a call came through, not from Logan, from someone else, an email forwarded from corporate legal. They wanted Troy's consent to publicly release his memos as part of the brand's apology statement. They offered him a script, a video, a chance to speak. He declined. His only request? Print every report I ever wrote. Bind them. Leave them in the staff lounge. Let them read what they chose not to. Will Harper be prosecuted or protected by corporate lawyers? Will Logan's respect turn into action or just policy changes? And what happens when the world forgets next week? Some people shout to be heard. Others leave a paper trail, knowing one day the truth will speak louder than they ever could. The following Monday, most employees arrived late, still shaken from the smoke, the media, and the silence that came after. But Troy Maxwell was already there, uniform clean, badge clipped, clipboard in hand. He didn't wait for permission to return, because he knew no one had the right to keep him out anymore. The mall's damage was contained to the lower freight hall, but the damage to the company's reputation was still spreading like wildfire. Public trust had collapsed. Employees whispered in elevators. Customers posted photos of melted ceiling tiles and scorched signage, captioned with, "They ignored him. We won't. If Troy quits, we all walk. He warned them. We saw it." Inside the boardroom, the mood had shifted from control to containment. What Logan Whitmore understood, what his father never had, was that sometimes saving the brand meant confronting the truth, not rewriting it. So he made a decision. At 10:32 a.m., Logan called an all-staff meeting. Unusual, unannounced, required. Troy was asked to be there. He didn't ask why. He stood by the back wall, arms folded, eyes steady, just as he'd always done. This time, no one told him to stand outside. The room filled with department heads, logistics teams, marketing staff. Harper Jennings's seat sat empty. Everyone noticed. Logan stood at the front. No PowerPoint, no talking points, just a single folder in his hand. He opened it. Inside were copies of Troy's 3 memos, printed, highlighted, time-stamped. He held them up. 3 warnings, he said quietly. Ignored. Buried. And because of that, people got hurt. No one moved. No one interrupted. Then Logan turned to Troy. "You were the only one who did your job fully. You didn't just protect the building. You tried to protect everyone in it." A few heads lowered, others turned toward Troy, not with suspicion anymore, but with recognition. He hadn't changed. They had. Logan continued. Harper Jennings has been removed from her position permanently. A federal investigation into procurement and internal fraud is now active, and every security report going forward will be archived independently and reviewed by a compliance panel. Then came the words no one expected. As of today, Troy Maxwell is promoted to Director of Safety Integrity, a new department designed to ensure that when people speak up, the system listens. There was no applause, just a pause. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from fear, but from realization. Troy nodded once, nothing more. He didn't need fanfare. He needed the door to stay open for the next person who tried to warn them. Outside the meeting, Rashida waited. She wasn't in uniform. She wasn't part of the event, but she held a folder of her own, full of evidence she'd helped recover, full of things that would have been erased if they hadn't acted. Troy walked up and took it without a word. She smiled. "You ready to clean house?" "Already started," he said. Over the next few days, Troy's small office on the second floor became a quiet storm. He reviewed old reports previously dismissed. He interviewed staff who had been silenced. He rewrote the mall's internal whistleblower policy, line by line. When asked how many people would be let go, he didn't answer. He didn't make lists, he followed facts. The damage had already been done. His job now wasn't revenge. It was redemption. For the place, for the people who still believed in truth, and for himself. One evening, long after closing, he walked the length of the darkened mall alone. Every step echoed, every corridor silent. But it wasn't the silence he once feared. Now the silence meant space. It meant the lies were gone, and that maybe, just maybe, the next person who spoke the truth wouldn't have to fight so hard to be heard. You can ignore a voice, you can bury a report, but you can't silence a man who shows up anyway, day after day, truth in hand. Word travels faster in silence than in noise. Despite her removal, Harper Jennings had not disappeared. She had vanished from the executive floor, yes, but not from the building. Rumors said she was still consulting remotely, that she was pulling strings to rewrite her narrative, that legal was building a case or a shield. Troy didn't care for rumors. He cared for records. So when he walked into the basement archive room and found 3 critical security reports missing, all tied to his previous complaints, he knew exactly where to go. The IT administrator said access to those files had been manually overridden at 7:14 p.m. the night before, a time when only 4 key cards had been used. 3 were accounted for. The 4th? Harper Jennings. At 5:47 p.m. that day, as employees began filing out of the mall, Troy stood outside the legal conference room on level 3. Inside, Harper sat with 2 attorneys and a compliance officer. She was dressed in all gray, sleek, calculated, untouchable. But when she saw Troy through the glass wall, her composure slipped, just for a moment. He entered without asking. The attorneys started to object, but Troy raised a hand. "Don't worry, I'm not here to accuse anyone. I'm here to return something." He placed a manila envelope on the table. Inside were printed transcripts of her remote logins, her download timestamps, and a recovered segment of footage from the night she tampered with the freight logs. "You thought wiping it made it disappear," he said. "You should have asked Rashida how backups work." Harper didn't speak. The compliance officer looked nervous. Troy continued. "I don't care if you confess. I don't care if they indict. But I need you to know something." He leaned in slightly. "You didn't beat me. You delayed me. And now, I'm the one holding the key to every door you tried to lock behind me." One of the lawyers asked him to leave. He did, but as he walked out, he looked back one last time. Truth doesn't need a podium. It just needs to last longer than the lie. And with that, he was gone. The next morning, a headline ran across the news. "Fired exec accused of tampering with evidence after Black Friday fire. Corporate issued no comment." But Logan watched the footage from the meeting. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. He simply forwarded the clip to the board with a single line. "He handled it better than any of us ever did. Meanwhile, Troy returned to his new role with quiet precision. He wasn't celebrating. He was reviewing files, speaking to overlooked staff, rebuilding policy not for publicity, but for permanence. In a meeting with janitorial staff, one of the oldest employees, Mr. Darnell, who'd worked cleaning floors since before the first renovation, shook his hand and said, "We've been waiting a long time for someone who didn't just sweep the dirt under." Troy nodded. "We're done sweeping. Now we document." In a small act no one asked for, Troy had the staff bulletin board replaced with a digital screen. Every week, it would feature a missed voice, anonymous excerpts from reports that had once been ignored. No names, just truths. He wanted the staff to see that silence had a shape, and they weren't alone anymore. At the week's end, Logan came by unannounced. No assistant, no suit, just a man carrying 2 coffees. He handed one to Troy, then said, "You saved this place, not with a badge, not with a title, but by refusing to go away." Troy didn't answer. He just nodded and took the coffee. Because sometimes survival is the victory, and sometimes the real reward is staying long enough to see the walls rebuilt and knowing they won't collapse again so easily. The most dangerous thing about telling the truth isn't being ignored. It's realizing, once it's heard, you're responsible for what happens next. It wasn't a press conference, but everyone came like it was. 3 weeks after the fire, the mall organized what they called a transparency forum, a rare event in corporate culture where public truth wasn't managed by PR, but offered face-to-face. Customers, journalists, fire officials, store managers, staff from every level filled the main atrium. The same place that once smelled like cinnamon pretzels and peppermint mist now held something heavier. At the front, beneath the skylight, stood Troy Maxwell. No suit, no stage makeup, just a man with a folder and the memory of being ignored. He didn't open with a thank you. He didn't apologize. He read dates. November 8th, I filed my first memo. November 14th, I filed the second. November 22nd, I filed the third. He placed the physical papers on the table beside him. I wasn't loud. I wasn't aggressive. I wasn't trying to go viral. I just wanted someone to read what I saw before it burned. No one moved. Even Harper's lawyers, seated in the last row, were silent. Troy looked out across the crowd. Sometimes when people like me speak up, we don't get heard. We get labeled. Bitter, difficult, aggressive, uncooperative. But I kept writing. Not because I believed you'd listen, but because I couldn't be the man who stayed silent and watched it happen. There were no claps, no music swell, just stillness. And that was enough. After he stepped down, people didn't rush him. They stood, from vendors to janitors to assistant managers. One by one, quietly, they walked up and shook his hand, not because they'd been told to, but because, this time, someone who looked like them had been believed. The following Monday, a memo circulated across the entire Whitmore corporate chain. Project Maxwell, a new model for internal integrity and whistleblower protection. Attached, a statement from Logan Whitmore. Inside, a formal acknowledgement of failure. A commitment to keep all safety memos archived and traceable. And a sentence that said simply, "When a man writes warnings no one reads, the system is already burning." But Troy didn't read the memo. He was busy training 2 new hires, both younger, both sharp, both eager. One of them asked him if the rumors were true. "Did you really predict the fire?" Troy didn't answer right away. He just handed the trainee a clipboard and said, "Get used to noticing things. It's your job now." Harper didn't return to the mall. She released a statement through her legal team. Vague, corporate, forgettable. She blamed the system, offered no apology, and disappeared from the press in less than a week. But Troy didn't need her remorse. He'd never filed those memos for her. He filed them for the record. Because records, even when buried, wait. And when the time comes, they speak louder than any person ever could. On a quiet Thursday night, long after closing, Troy walked the mall floor alone. The lights were dim, the escalators still, the echo of his steps soft against polished tile. He passed by the food court, the same one where he once sat alone, fired in silence. Now it was filled with the sound of restoration, construction teams repainting, crews rebuilding the freight hall, a new exit door being installed where the fire had started. It didn't make him proud, but it made him certain. There are men who guard doors, and there are men who guard truth. Sometimes they are the same. And when they are, the building stands a little longer. At the far end of the hallway, under a flickering light, someone had pinned up a small note on the staff bulletin board. It wasn't signed. It simply said, "He warned them. They didn't listen. He stayed anyway." Troy stared at it for a moment, then reached up, straightened it, and walked away.